We can start. Good afternoon. Welcome to seminar number 86. I also want to welcome our colleagues online. Our presenter is Dr. Ngwira. Dr. Ngwira will speak on health technology assessment, the progress report, and HEPU. So HEPU is basically the health economics and policy unit. So what we'll do is we'll ask Dr. Ngwira to come in front. He will briefly introduce himself. We'll go through the presentation, and then at the very end, he'll probably leave us about 10 minutes for questions and answers. Dr. Ngwira, please welcome.
Thanks Richard, and thanks your team, Rich, for organizing this. It's a privilege for me to stand here and just talk to you on the health technology assessment. And thanks again, colleagues, for hanging in there. Online apologies, we started a bit late. So always I start the presentation by just having a whether you know what health technology assessment is. So always that's my starting. I start by, when I'm doing this presentation on health technology assessment, I do just ask the audience, just having a few in the room, how many understand what or have heard of health technology assessment. I don't know how many have heard of health technology assessment, but show of hands. Oh, so this is a new thing. Very good, very good. Okay. So that gives me where to start from. Okay. So the health technology. So move away from the thought of a technology per se. Just think about the health technology being anything. It could be a drug, or it could be the pricing of that drug, or it could be the infrastructure, or it could be the medical equipment itself. Whatever it is that is designed in the delivery of healthcare services, that is called a health technology. So it could be a bottle, you design it in such a way that it has a tube, and it has a drip. That would be a technology, okay, because it's designed for healthcare delivery. So thinking that way, when you think about health technology, you're talking about, it could be medicine, it could be the equipment itself, it could be the infrastructure, it could be so whatever it is that is designed in the delivery of healthcare, that is called a health technology. Okay, so when we say health technology assessment, we mean a holistic way, multidisciplinary, of analyzing medical equipment, economic, social impact, and the ethical implications as well on the development, diffusion, and the use of health technologies. So that's, if you want you to remember what a health technology assessment is all about, it's very multidisciplinary. So you look at that medicine, that drug, in terms of economic impact, in terms of efficacy, in terms of effectiveness, in terms of affordability, in terms of economic impact. That holistic way of looking at that technology is called technology assessment. So in practice, it's obviously, as I said, on the third point here, in principle it could be applied to a wide range of health technologies, including systems of organizing healthcare, but oftentimes in practice it's only applied to pharmaceuticals, medical devices, as well as clinical procedures. So these are the steps that are done in a health technology assessment. So number one is you identify a topic that needs to be assessed, and then you specify the system, and then you search for data for that topic that you're looking at. Do a systematic review, clinical procedures brought into the equation, economic evaluation brought in the equation, and then you assess the social, legal, and ethical implications of that technology, and then add the new formulate recommendations for implementation by policymakers. And then obviously you do the more M and E afterwards. So this is just give you a summary of what a health technology does. What you see here are the types of technologies, and what you see here on your right are the things that you consider in a health technology assessment. So just for example, suppose go forward. Yeah. If you pick out vaccines, for example, say there's a new vaccine on the market that you're wanting to introduce in Malawi. So what you do against that vaccine, so that vaccine, you consider that vaccine across the safety, clinical effectiveness, ethical issues, equity issues, all that holistic way. That is a health technology assessment. But what you see when it comes to health technology assessment is there is kind of the paradox that you see in this framework, where high-income countries that you see here, that have got very strong health systems, they efficiently use an HTA for resource allocation. And for countries where we are in fragile or in low and medium countries, there's less use of HTA. So that's kind of the paradox that happens. For those that are rich, they are very careful in terms of how they use their money. For those of us that are, we kind of, in terms of the steps that we need, in terms of how we prioritize what our needs are, kind of limit in that regard. So, the point, right, I think I'll stand here. What's the point? That's sometimes, So what you see here is just giving you a spectrum of HTA in Africa, where you see that there's a limited use of evidence informed for priority setting, and the African Union member states, there are different stages of HTA institutionalization, where you have countries like Ghana, and they are very much advanced. They've got an institutionalized HTA for resource allocation. And then you go those in the middle, for example, Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Africa, that they are kind of on the next level of HTA institutionalization. And then we've got some, like us in Malawi, that have just developed the conceptual framework, and then we're going to implementation. And then the rest, don't know where they are. Okay? So it's in mind that Africa CDC, I'm sure we all know about or have heard about the Africa CDC. Yeah, okay, so based in Addis, and they are trying as much as they can to assist member states that they can have priority setting using an HTA framework. And so they've got a health economics and policy program within the Africa CDC. They've got different programs. They got AMR, they got a health economics as well program. That's African member states, to come with a framework for priority setting. So in Malawi, this is kind of stems from the work that was done by Professor Joseph Futsubengo and the team within the Health Economics and Policy Unit to look at the feasibility and acceptability of health technology institutionalizing HTA in Malawi. And so what they did find is that the HTA is really very much disintegrated. It's very much at committee level, and that's technical working groups. Okay, so you got an HTSS in health finance, different technical working groups that sometimes work in silo. They're not talking to each other. Okay, so that's number one finding, and number two, that there was misalignment on the values or principles that you're using for assessing technology. What we mean by that is they would have set principles or things to look into when assessing the technology, but when it comes on the ground, in reality, when they're assessing that technology, there is a difference between what agreed on and what is used in practice. That misalignment. Okay? and also the limited use of evidence and the lack of a standardized framework for doing the assessment, as well as the political and development partner pressures, as well as the suppliers of health technologies to force their technology to be implemented, even though there is no evidence or lack of evidence. I was speaking to one of the directors last Monday, so I was presenting on the HTA, I was presenting to the senior management team at the Ministry of Health headquarters in Lilongwe. The directors in the department was just mentioning or lamenting about how American organization was forcing on them to implement on a certain technology. I'm not going to say what, but there was no evidence for it. And she said no, but there was a political pressure to it, and it was forced that it has to be implemented. Okay, and so she was just saying, with the committee is looking into that, then you can say, this is not under my control. It's a committee is looking into that, and so she's not pointed fingers by political influences or development partners. So that's basically things on board. And so when we did ask at the different directorates within the Ministry of Health, there was a high potential for institutionalizing HTA in Malawi. And you can look up some of these papers later on showing that evidence. And so with that genesis, started here in Kuhes at HEPU, as I said, led by Prof. Mfutsubengo. Then we took that concept to the HEP Financing TWG, presented our findings, and they approved it, that they have to be presented at the MOH team. So the MOH senior management team brings together all directors from the different departments within the ministry. So it's chaired by the Secretary for Health. Yeah, so I presented it back in April last year, and they were happy with the concept and approved it, but they said you have to form a task force that should look at HTA institutionalization in a holistic manner. So there are 4 pillars that we look at on HTA. Number 1, look at the governance and structure, and then we look at the capacity to do that HTA. We look at the mandate and the principles that will govern that HTA, and the number 4, we look at the financing to do that HTA. So that was presented to the MOH senior management team. They approved the concept. A task force was said to be was commissioned to be instituted right away. And then so this is just giving you kind of an overview of what happens right now in the committee base, which is kind of rationale for doing an institutionalized HTA. To say currently, say for example, if there's a new technology on our TB screening, the technology is free of charge, yeah? And then it has got evidence on effectiveness, so you tick the box. Affordability, yeah, because this is a free technology, yeah, okay. But then you might not look at the cost effectiveness. So there's a problem there, yeah, because if you look across all this spectrum or things that you have evaluated, there are some things that you're looking at, but not the whole big picture. So that's problem number 1. And then think about a vaccine that's being introduced. You look at affordability, so it's free, okay? Whether Pfizer or whatever it is, they're providing that technology, they're giving it for free. So it is affordable, yeah, because it's given for free. Efficacy, is shown to be, efficacious. There's effectiveness, there's safety to it, yeah? But what we forget on the ground is things like acceptability. Now we've seen the issues with COVID vaccine, how it was, and things like cost effectiveness has not been looked into. And so even though at this committee TWG level, they might look at, evaluate that vaccine by the EPI department, there are some things that are not taken into consideration and becomes a problem when you're implementing it. Okay? So that's why when you're institutionalizing HTA, basically you're not just picking out some of these things, you're making sure that all these things have been looked into before implementing it. Okay, so by and large what we're saying is that it brings different experts, and these are the experts that you bring on the table, and they evaluate across all these. You're marrying these with that expertise, make sure that you come with an optimal decision making. Yeah, so that's just a summary of the HTA institutionalization rationale for Malawi, to say it will bring value for money because it coordinates HTA processes and transparency, accountability, as well as consistency in appraisal processes, its independence from political and government partner influences, as well as making sure there's equitable allocation of resources. Okay, right, so where are we? So this is just showing you what we've done as an HTA task force. So I should mention here that the task force is led by the MOH Planning Department. So there's a Deputy Director in Planning who is leading this. And the partners for the task force have been brought in from all different departments within government and different ministries, academia and research institutions. I'm going to show you on the next slide who are composing up the task force. But just for you, just to see the timeline from when the HTA institutionalization was presented to the Minister of Health senior managed team back in April 2013, TO has been developed, and then the task force being instituted led by the planning department, co-led by us in HEPU, and then inception meeting which happened in November of 2023. And so this is just a composition, as you can see, of the task force. You can see from government ministries, you've got Ministry of Health, and then you've got the different departments that are in this task force. You've got Ministry of Justice, Finance, Local Government. You've got government agencies like the PMRA, Medical Council. You've got associations. You've got academia, where we are there, and then you've got civil societies as well as the international partners. So really very holistic when we talk about this task force, making sure that we come up with a conceptual framework for HTA institutionalization that is fit for purpose for our setting in Malawi. And the mandate twofold. Number one is to evaluate the HTA across the pillars, 4 pillars of HTA, that's governance and structure and legal, mandate and the principles, as well as the capacity and financing, and then come up with a conceptual framework and make those recommendations to the policymakers. So the process that we did, Liz, is as you can see here, number one was we did kind of a landscape analysis to see what's on the ground, and then that informed the development of conceptual framework. And then the step number 2 is we had a consensus building workshop where we brought all the stakeholders from that task force to agree on that concept and kind of tweak it, to the best of our setting. And then phase number 3 was to validate the findings and make the necessary recommendations for that. So across these 4 pillars, I'm going to talk about these ones. Number 1 on the legislature and the structure of an HTA. So basically, number 1, we're looking at which of the laws of Malawi on health does the HTA kind of marry itself to. And then we're also looking at the structure. Should it be fully independent, or should it be a hybrid, in the sense that hybrid means it is within the Ministry of Health as a department or division, but also having a mixture over the policymakers as well as the academicians and private sector in that. So that's in the context of hybrid. And then you look at the mandate, what this HTA is going to look at, pharmaceutical, medical devices, diagnostic tools, clinical practices as well, public health interventions, and then you measuring across those principles. And then the capacity to do that assessment. And then the source of funding. Okay? So just to show you that prior to building up this conceptual framework, we looked at the guidelines from WHO in terms of the HTA, and then we also looked at the guidelines from the National Institute of Health and Clinical Excellence in the UK, NICE. So when you talk about HTA, for example, in the world, NICE in the UK are kind of right there at the very top. It's kind of a gold standard, I'm saying gold in quotes. Okay, so we did look at the framework as well. We also looked at in the low and middle-income countries, Thailand has been really what would be the word to use? Have taken the lead in HTA processes. They have really done very well. So we did look at their framework as well for Thailand. And then we also looked at, closer to home, we looked at the conceptual framework that it is in South Africa. And then also looked at the framework for the Africa CDC. So as I mentioned in my initial discussion or initial slide, I did mention about the work that Africa CDC through the Health Economics Program are doing to help African Union states to come up with a conceptual framework for priority setting. So we did look across all those kind of frameworks so that we can be informative in developing a framework for us here in Malawi that is fit for purpose for us. Okay. So now, this is where we are. So we proposed two frameworks. So this was framework number one. So framework we're looking at is, this is a fully autonomous framework where you got an HTA operation. Okay, so you got a board. So this is like a parastatal. Okay, so it is away from the ministry. Okay, so it's kind of a standalone parastatal. Where it's got a board, and then you've got an executive team, and then it's got an HTA operational unit. And within those HTA operational units, there's one that's looking at equipment and infrastructure. There's one that's looking at economic evaluation. Another one, political analysis. The other one is looking at capacity building. And another one is looking at clinical evaluation. And the bottom line is to make sure that across all these, they are, as you remember, with an HTA, we're saying it's a holistic way of looking at things, not just looking at things in silo. Yeah. So that was number one. And then you also have the patient representatives through perhaps the civil society organizations that also, bring something on the table. Okay? So that was option number one. And within that, two ways. One was to say perhaps a new entity has to be created, or it can build on existing structures, like what the functions that the PMRA are doing. But just building on what they're doing, giving them more mandate for adoption as well as the implementation. So we looked at two ways within this standalone institution, two ways that you can do that. Either create something from the scratch or build on an existing one, like the PMRA framework. So it's got its merits and demerits of doing that. Number one, we believe, being independent, you can lead to efficiency. It could lead to independence, public trust and credibility. When it's something independent, when it's been assessed, there is trust it's not being pushed by political influences or donor partner influences. And then a clear focus vision mission on HTA. And then disadvantages really requires heavy investment to start up with this one. And especially if you're starting with the Act of Parliament, there is quite a lot that has gone. So the process of having that, is really lengthy. So those are the demerits of having, kind of fully autonomous HTA process. But also, bear in mind that independence does not really mean efficiency. There are other organizations that were a part of the departments within the Ministry of Health, not Ministry of Health, but ministry departments, that evolved into becoming independent parastatal organizations. Are they all efficient? Yeah. So fully autonomous is not synonymous with efficiency. Okay, they are success stories, but they are failures as well. And then number two, what we looked at is option number two, where we're saying now, instead of it being independent, it is within the Ministry of Health in one of the departments. And so within that one, what we're looking at is across all the departments within the Ministry of Health, they've got the senior management team that sits at the top, and that one sets the agenda on. So if it's there, 5 needs that goes to MOH senior management team, which one do they fund? Okay, how do you rank? Which one to go for? So we believe within this framework, it could be sent to a think tank. There's an ongoing think tank right now, but it's looking at just a HEPU financing. Now we're looking at a think tank that is across all the 9 pillars of an HSSP 3. Within that one is for really collecting evidence. If there's gap in evidence, it goes to policy labs, and these policy labs could be institutions of learning like ourselves here. It could be AFIDEP, it could be whatsoever, depending on the topic. So evidence is generated, it goes back, and then making sure that the topics that came, that's got all the evidence, it goes to HTA division, and there's an appraisal committee that looks in and then ranks which ones should be implemented or not. But that one is just making recommendations by the appraisal committee, because the senior management team at Ministry of Health has to make the final decision in terms of adoption. So at the same time, when we do that, we're also looking at, you know, advantages and disadvantages of doing that. But also there's a question of where does it go within the 12 departments of the Ministry of Health. You know, there has to be a systematic way to identify which of the departments it has to go to. And when we did this one, so we identified number one through there's a functional review that's happening right now by the Human Resources Department within the Ministry of Health. So we kind of piggyback to what they're doing to do a rapid functional review. We looked at, identified 4 departments: HTSS, that's our Health Technical Support Services; the DPPD, that's the Planning Department; the FIM, as well as the Quality Management Division, HQMD. So we identified those 4, and out of those 4, we fell for the DPPD. And the reason being, there is things that are done at the DPPD that really matter here, because number one is they are the ones that design the Health Sector Strategic Plan, HSSP, is done by the Planning Department, number one. And number two, when you talk about the development of the Health Benefit Package, or Essential Health Package, that's done by the Planning Department, okay? So, look at the matrix that they're using for designing of a Health Benefit Package. They're using cost-effective analysis, they're using affordability, they're using the burden of disease. And so, to us, when we look at the next year, really the work that the HTA is going to do really matches with what the planning are doing. So we thought that would be an ideal place where it can be located. Yeah, but it has to be a scientific process for making sure that we identify. Otherwise, you know, yeah, we had issues initially with different departments, directors, and saying, why not my department and why not mine? So we had to make sure that there is a scientific process to identify that department. So this is the department that was identified is a planning department, as I showed you. So within that one, what you see here is the HTA appraisal committee. So the appraisal committee are going to look at whatever topics have come from MOH via the HSSP, you know, come to the air. The division is just a secretariat, and then it goes to the appraisal committee made up of policymakers, academicians, researchers, private sector to appraise that technology. And they make recommendations, and then it goes to senior management team for them for adoption. So happy to say this has been approved. So when I presented it on Monday to the ministry, senior management team within the Ministry of Department, with Ministry of Health, yeah, it was a hot meeting that we had. Yeah, and the Secretary of Health, you know, made remarks jokingly that I think my presentation, you know, has been the one that has been so divisive to the members of the senior management team in a positive way, you know, because it was rich discussion, you know, but also they did approve it. And then, so in terms of how they've approved it, so this is, you can see in the previous slide, you saw the committee, yeah? The HTA appraisal committee. So I'm just bringing that one onto the next slide to show you the composition of the committee. Yeah, coming up from, so bringing this expertise, yeah? And so the question is, where do they come from? So these are examples of institutions where they'll come from. So all these will sit on the committee when the technology comes. So it's been approved that the Chief of Health Services is going to be the one who's going to chair this meeting. So that was decided on Monday as well. So he's going to be the chairman of that meeting. And then across all these organizations, representative comes, they sit on the committee, and then they appraise the technology. So making sure that it is looked holistically. Yeah, so this is what institutionalization of an HTA is about. Yeah, and this is a value sets in terms of where, you know, it's coming, how it's going to be assessed, the different aspects. And the other thing that I want you to just remember, that we did find misalignment, as I said, in the initial work that we did between the normative values, so that's agreed on values, and what is done in practice. Yeah? So to make sure that there is alignment between what you agree on and what you do in practice, there is a VEDMAP application that has been developed to assist. So in the committee sitting in there, you have that app with you, and then making sure that across these ones, these were agreed on, and then when you're making the assessment, those are plugged in onto the app. So nothing falls through. That we agreed on this one, and only you end up just implementing or just evaluating some and not all. So that app makes sure that there is that cohesion between what you agree on and what you do in practice. Yeah, but it's a whole day that I can talk about the VEDMAP. So maybe that'll be a good topic of another day that Richard is going to ask our team to present to you. Yeah, and the last that we looked at in that pillar of an HTA was the financing, to say where would the money come from to do an HTA appraisal. So this is what the the task force looks at, that first of all, in the short, medium term, what we can look at is fully supported by the government, being like we are here at HUHES, which is fully funded by the government. But in the medium to long term, it can move on to becoming independent by charging levies. So for example, just like when you do a protocol, submit to Comrec, and Comrec charges you, a certain fee. So could do the same with an HTA appraisal. That if there's a technology that needs to be assessed, when it's being submitted, there is a fee, a levy, for generation of income for sustainability. Yeah, so in terms of next steps, this is what we're looking at, developing standard operating procedures and other, operating documents, then drafting this cabinet for seeing if it can be added into the Public Health Act of Malawi, which is now under revision. So wanting to do that, sensitizing the parliamentarians before the next sitting in December. And then obviously benchmarking a framework against, maybe Ghana or Thailand. Yeah, and then coming up with the final recommendations to the Minister of Health. But what they said on Monday is that the HTA institutionalization has been approved and it starts today. So this is now coming into effect. Yeah, and just ending by thanking the Minister of Health, because they've been very helpful. The political environment has been very good for them to accept this. And then the partners that have been funding us, and the task force members. I'm standing here on behalf of the task force members. As I showed you, there's a whole lot of task force members, so I'm just privileged to be standing here, and yet the whole task force that have done the heavy lifting. And obviously HUHES and HEPU staff members, and you, the audience, for being here. Really appreciate that. I took you outside the anatomy, I took you outside, the laboratory work, and took you on health economics. So I'm a health economist, and this is a tool for priority setting for health economics. So think about health economics when you're doing your work, and think about HTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc, for a good presentation. It's insightful. May I now ask members if you have any questions? The Doc, or any comments? Any of your questions before I continue? Sorry? Any questions?
Okay, I think I can go sit down.
Let me see if you have any online. Colleagues online, any questions for you? No.
If they don't, then I have a question for them.
Yes.
Okay. So I've got a question for you now. What is a health technology assessment? Who is courageous enough to put up a hand and just say how do they understand what health technology assessment is? No, it's not a hand. You just are playing with you're deciding. Yeah. Okay. So what would you say? After walking out this room, what was this about? This seminar, what was it about? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the way I understood, knowledge assessment, these are sort of like steps that were put in place or criteria that is put in place in order to evaluate and analyze products for health services like you mentioned, vaccines, medicine, things like that before they implemented it. And also to make sure that they meet sort of like our standard.
Yeah. Well done. Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
So on the values.
Yes.
Just go back on the values.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So on the values, I think you highlighted intellectual property.
Okay.
So I think my interest is also similar to that.
Yeah.
To say when you're doing the assessment and the engaging with different stakeholders, where are we as a country in terms of intellectual property?
Yeah.
And then also because now it goes back to the issue of, let's say for example, you have a brilliant idea in terms of something that can be patented.
Yeah.
What I've also learned is that normally people struggle to convince somebody to part of the money because it doesn't always mean that whatever technologies you're developing might have value in the future, but you're hoping it.
Exactly.
So I was trying to think about how do we navigate through that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rich. No, that's a very good question. Actually, it's quite interesting. I think last month, last month. So with the chancellor, we were attending a meeting, a regional dialogue meeting in Lilongwe. It was called Emerging Technologies. That was organized by AFIDEP. So it brought 13 African member states, and they were looking at emerging technologies. So this one, intellectual property, came in on the back of that emerging technology. It's very sad. The Vice Chancellor was just mentioning that at one point he went to India. And he went to India and someone was showing him about this new machine called Kupuma. And he's explaining to him what Kupuma is all about. In India. So roll back the dice, it happened that Kupuma was a technology that was developed here. Yeah? And someone ran away with it. And they're making money. And he goes there and someone is explaining to him, this Kupuma thing, it's an African word, that means to safeguard international property, in that meeting, as I said, the Vice Chancellor was in attendance, is to make sure that, so we had experience, for example, of Michigan State University. They gave us an experience of their university, how it works. So they said, for any technology that is developed, so within the university, there's a division or a department that is safeguarding intellectual property. So they are the ones that assist between the university and the private sector. Yeah. So goes or can be stolen because guarding it. Yeah. And then when you've got a technology that goes on the market, they've got a way of rewarding in terms of royalties. So when they're starting, they've got a bracket for if a few $1,000s, maybe from 1,000 to 10,000 or dollars, then you get 50% of the royalties, the investment 40%. When to 50,000, then you get 40%. The investor gets 60. When it's above $50, you get 30% of the royalties. The investor gets 70%. But it's a win-win situation. Okay, so people are not scared, to start a technology and without the knowledge of the university, and at the same time, they are guarded. They are safeguarded that their technology is not stolen. So it is on the back of that one that we thought having intellectual property in this as one of the value sets would be really important for any new technology that comes, making sure that there is intellectual property so that knowledge is not stolen. People come take pictures The Chinese ran away with it. Yeah. In terms of way forward, it is the Vice Chancellor's office. Probably, there's going to be kind of that initiative to have within the university, kind of a department that, is giving legal opinion and assistance, but something that stands between the university as well as the outside world. Yeah.
So my question regards to being that the task force, like you also mentioned that the task force has been established. So what can you say are some of the challenges that the task force can do to being that
Yeah, so the task force, we've had some challenges in terms of coming up with a conceptual framework that fits for Malawi. So, things that I would say is, say for example, now with the committee based, okay, imakanga ningodi, okay, at least in good work it, they become so protective, because sometimes, that's, it's like a baby looked after them, and that's how things have been done, and now you going against the standard practice, and really you're invoking, how it's done, and that, sometimes, it's positive, and sometimes, so it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of an institutionalization. That one was evident, we could see, but at the same time, there were others that were very much for to say, so for example, like I mentioned the example of one of the directors on Monday was mentioning about how they were receiving political and development partner pressures to say, can they roll out on this one? And she was saying, if HTA institutionalization was back then, all I would say is, no, this is being looked into by the HTA committee. And then that takes out the burden from her. So no one is just pointing fingers at her, but, the HTA committee is looking into that. So, so others receptive, others not. So we'll see when it comes to implementation. One of the things that we're forcing, or we're wanting to make sure that it goes in, as I was showing you on the next steps, is it goes into the Public Health Act of Malawi, to make sure that the HTA institutionalization or the processes appraisal is not just something on paper. Okay, it just covers dust. So there has to be, kind of a legal way or a mandate within the Public Health Act to make sure that that is enforced. Because if not, then, people opt out, so, but to make sure that everyone does that as standard practice. Sure.
Okay. Thank you. So, with your permission, I don't know, can I say the slide? I've had the online, I'm sure you guys will also want to.
I'll send you the slide. I'll send you. Yes.
So, for it, I think if you need it, you can send us an email at LISE.info, right? At you just ask, I would like to have the slide, and then we should be able to send it. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Don't take it for granted.
Sure.
We usually have this almost each and every month. So when you see a poster, you normally do it in the Gift but now we transfer it because something that happened there. So please, when you see a poster, come visit us. Let's have this nice lunch, and then you talk with you. I'm pretty sure you've learned a lot of things from there. So let's clap hands for him.
Thank you.
So the platform is open.
No. No, thank you very much, Rich, and thanks everyone again. We've got so many work streams that we're able to share, but as I said, we are not sharing one share you anatomy. It's all about health economics and health financing. So that's what we are. They are supporting the health financing delivery in Malawi. From the money side. And just to assure you that I brought a jacket, but I hope it's okay to present without a jacket. It was too. Thank you.